We've seen them play against each other. How will they play against the SEC? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking Tennessee football. We've got Nathaniel Rutherford on the line from Rocky Top Insider to break down what we saw at the orange and white game and throughout the spring sessions. Nathaniel, thanks for coming back. We appreciate it. How you doing today?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on again. I'm doing great, Mark. Thank you.
So a couple Saturdays ago in Knoxville, the orange played the white on the orange. It's often difficult to surmise what transpired because of the rules and the scrimmage nature of the action. And of course, team going against team. So did the defensive front look that dominant, or was the offensive line just having that many issues? That sort of thing. But with everything put into context, Nathaniel, what did you take from the game?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention defensive line, offensive line, because I think those were kind of the two biggest storylines heading into the spring for Tennessee, and that ended up being kind of the biggest storylines coming out of the spring for Tennessee. I thought heading into the spring game that I'd seen a little bit more from the offensive line there in practices, that maybe they would take, not a big step, but that maybe they kind of turn the corner a little bit. It didn't seem like the case against their own, in a scrimmage situation in the orange-white game, and like you said, it's hard to tell because you don't know how good. Maybe the defense is better than we thought it was going to be. Maybe the offensive line's worse than we thought it was going to be. But I would still kind of hold off on making any big judgments on that, because I thought the defensive line, the defense overall, did play maybe a little bit better than we thought they're going to. But offensive line-wise, you had Wayne Morris as a true freshman starting for Tennessee on the first-team offense, and I thought he was okay. They tested him a lot. They sent a lot of blitz packages and stuff to his side, and were definitely testing him more. And I think that's going to help prepare him, obviously, coming into the fall when they play a heavy SEC schedule and some really good teams this year. But there's a lot of breakdowns still. There weren't as many mental mistakes this time as you saw last year, and I think that's a good step in the right direction. There wasn't a lot of guys just not being able to do things because they didn't know what they're supposed to be doing. There's just, typical, I don't think the talent's there yet for the offensive line. They do welcome in Darnell Wright this offseason, and I think they'll be better this year than we were last year. And they kind of have to be. They're pretty bad last year. But defensive line wise, I was fairly intrigued by what I saw about the defense. But like you said, it's hard to tell too much from it. It doesn't change my predictions, kind of my early predictions of Tennessee a ton. But it does make me feel like they may not be able to reach their high ceiling of what I think could maybe eight wins in a season. I think could be the ceiling for this year's team. I think if the offensive line doesn't take another significant step forward, that they will not be able to get there. They should still be able to get to a bowl game, but I think the offensive line struggles are going to hold them back from maybe reaching their highest potential for this season.
And that's absolutely an evaluation that can be made. Are the particular units getting lined up correctly? Mm-hmm. Are there mental mistakes, mental penalties that are being made, or are those being prevented? And is there at least clean play? Because much of a football game, like any athletic event, particular teams beat themselves as much as the other team beats them. And if you can avoid and eliminate those mistakes, then you obviously have an opportunity to compete. A few other areas in which I think it's fairly valid. I think a defensive back matched up against a wide receiver, you get to see the separation the wide receiver gains, or that the defensive back can blanket that wide receiver. And you see just that one-on-one matchup in space. Obviously, running backs breaking tackles, depending on the tackling rules at the spring game, and quarterbacks who major on escapability. Not so much with Jared Guarantano, not that he's not mobile to a certain extent, but we'll go to him in regards to how at least he anticipated throws and made the throws.
Yeah, you speak of his mobility. He didn't show much of it his first 2 years at Tennessee. I thought he showed a little bit more in the orange-white game. He still took several sacks and quote unquote sacks. There's maybe a couple he wouldn't have taken sacks on, but there are also a couple they didn't call that I think he would have maybe eventually been sacked on if the play kind of played out how it would in a real game. But he did scramble a couple different times and got good 6 to 12 yard gains on a couple of them. So I think he had the second longest run of the game for Tennessee on offense. So. But going back to his actual throwing, I thought he looked fine. He finished the game with 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and like you said, you can't take a ton away from that from a spring game, because you can obviously do things to make certain units look better, do things to make certain units not look as good. But overall, I thought he did a decent job of getting quick releases, and I think that's going to be the big emphasis point this year. Is for most of the games this year. I think Jim Chaney and that offense are going to try to limit limit how long the offensive line has to block. and try to do a lot of quicker passes and maybe do more intermediate routes between the 5 to 15-yard variety. And I think they'll chuck it deep. I mean, that we've seen Jim Shea do that before with Tennessee and also other offenses too. But I do genuinely think that Tennessee's wide receiver core is one of the best in the SEC. You look at the starting trio of Juwan Jennings, who's now healthy. He looked very healthy in the spring game, and I thought he looked really good. And if he stays healthy, he's going to be really good this year for Tennessee. You have him, you have Marquez Callaway, and you have Josh Palmer. Palmer, to me, he won the Most Improved award on offense for Tennessee this spring, and I thought he had a kind of a breakout campaign last year. He averaged 21 yards per catch, only on 23 receptions, but he almost had 500 yards on those receptions. So he flashed some potential last year. I think those three guys are going to be a very good trio of receivers. If Garantano can just get a decent amount of protection this year, I'm not expecting him to light up the scoreboard. I'm not expecting him to put up Heisman candidate numbers or even first team SEC numbers. But I do think from what I've seen of his progression and growth already in just a few months under Jim Chaney, what he can do coming in August and September, I fully expect him to be able to maybe take a little more risks than what he has before, but still be more kind of a game manager, not asked to do a ton of flashy things. I think Tennessee's offense will be productive this year as long as that, like I said, it goes back to the offensive line. I think Garantano's taken some steps. He definitely has from a leadership standpoint this spring, but I really think it's that his next step is going to be contingent upon what kind of protection he can get.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Tennessee Vols, courtesy Nathaniel Rutherford. You can catch him and the rest of the staff there at Rocky Top Insider. Of course, lock it in here for college football coverage every day. The best discussion, debate, and analysis. Please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe. Jeremy Banks is a player that I've seen a number of commentaries about his play throughout the spring and specifically what he showed at the orange and white game. He's a young player that was prone to fumbling a bit. Your thoughts about maybe his emergence this season?
Yeah, he showed last year that, if he keeps the hold of the ball and doesn't fumble it, he's got pretty good potential. He's not going to be a guy that's going to bust a bunch of runs. He's probably not going to have the greatest yard per carry average of any of Tennessee's running backs. That's going to be more like a Ty Chandler role to have a higher yard per carry. But he is a tough kid who doesn't go down on first contact almost every single time he has the ball. And he didn't fumble it in the orange white game. He did a much better job of keeping the ball safe. And he wasn't just used as a running back. He was used in the passing game. He tied for the team lead in receptions. He didn't get a bunch of yards on it, but he had 5 catches for 21 yards. I think he averaged about 3 yards per carry on his attempts, but he looked good. And like I said, was dragging guys, wasn't falling down on first contact, was falling forward. That was a big thing. Where I think he differs from Tim Jordan last year, and I do want to see this difference from Tim Jordan for Tennessee this year, is Jordan kind of had the tendency, he's kind of used as a power back for Tennessee, but he kind of bounced around, and I think he thought he was more of a scat back than what he was. Banks doesn't have that. He hits the hole and he falls forward for yards, and sometimes that got him in trouble because he tried to fight forward for yards and extend the ball out there and not protect it, and that's what led to some of the fumbles. But I think if he hangs on to it, I think if he's getting good coaching from David Johnson, who's now the running backs coach, who I think he's doing a good job so far with this unit. If he can hold on to that ball and keep it safe, he's going to be a legitimate third option at running back for Tennessee this year, and a very good kind of change of pace from what Ty Chandler and Tim Jordan bring. And he could be their kind of their goal line guy too, because he's big. He's 6'1", a little over 200-something pounds. He's a big kid. Like I said, if he can hold on to the ball and not fumble it, not give it away, he's going to get a lot of carries this season. He won't lead the team in any category, maybe touchdowns or rushing touchdowns, but he's going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of looks because I think the staff really likes him as long as he holds on to the ball.
Talking Tennessee football here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the videos. Lock it in right here for daily college football coverage. We've got Nathaniel Rutherford on the line from Rocky Top Insider following the orange and white and looking forward to August camp. Difficult to tell what the coaching staffs think of these teams at times, but sometimes they let a little bit of opinion slip, whether they are extremely high and pleased or whether there's some disappointment in regards to how much progression's been made. Any indications of Jeremy Pruitt's thoughts about this particular team, his concerns versus some things that have surprised him maybe?
Yeah, this time last year, he was definitely in evaluation mode, and he wasn't naming players by name. I think it took maybe until the orange-white game last year for him to actually start naming guys by name, and even then he wasn't doing it a lot. This year, I think he feels more comfortable about the team. They're still not where he wants them to be overall, but he's talked multiple times this spring about leadership finally emerging. He's talking about Jarrett Garantano's leader, Darrell Taylor on defense, Daniel Batuli on defense. Guys that are finally starting to see some more player leadership. And I think that's a big thing because he talked about last year multiple times that there weren't really that many player leaders. And that's always kind of an issue with the team. The best teams are ones that are led by the players, not the ones that are led by the coaches. So I think you're seeing that emerge. And I think Pruitt, as he's talked about that, and he likes it, he's mentioned Garantano several different times during the spring. And that's good news too for Tennessee because you need, obviously, quarterback play is so pivotal into winning games. But like I said, the offensive line is still going to be an issue there. I think he likes this team more than he did last year. And I don't know if he would come out and say that himself, but I think he genuinely does like the direction of this team, where they're going. And then the fact that a lot of these guys have bought in, I think buy-in was kind of an issue for some players last year. Not for the team overall, not for all of the guys, maybe not even for the majority of the guys, but there were definitely a sect of guys last year where you could tell weren't bought in completely to what this staff was trying to do, what the staff was selling, and what they're telling them. Now I think you're seeing a lot more guys who have bought in and seem more focused and ready to go and hit the offseason pretty hard heading into spring practices. And I'm going to be very intrigued to see who has a really good summer. And I think that's going to lead into fall. And I'd be curious to see what Pruitt says about the team in the fall. But I do think he genuinely likes this team more this time right now than he did this time last year.
If you love college football, you're in the right place. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, bringing you college football talk each and every day. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Love the contribution here from Nathaniel Rutherford. We've had him on in the past, previewing the orange and white. Now we get the recap, and you can join Nathaniel at Rocky Top Insider. Recruiting is Jeremy Pruitt's game. One of the big reasons why he landed his first big head coaching job. Did a nice job, and I'm impressed with the Tennessee brand through the ups and downs, and basically 2 good seasons in the last 10 or 11 years. And that's been it, that the brand still holds nationally and certainly in the region. And Jeremy Pruitt seems to be already in the mix for a number of 2020 and 2021 prospects that are at the top of recruiting boards.
Yeah, they haven't gotten a ton of big names just yet as of us doing this interview. They do have 4-star quarterback Harrison Bailey, who I think could end up being one of the top quarterbacks in this specific cycle in the 2020 class. They do have 4-star defensive lineman Dominic Bailey, and they have right now, according to 247 Sports, the #1 overall junior college player in Jordan Davis, 4-star defensive end. They do have some intriguing guys who I think could end up climbing and rankings in Ebony Jackson and Jimmy Callaway, the guys that just had recently committed. But they're in on, as you mentioned, a lot of guys in this 2020 cycle who are highly rated guys who are, potential instant impact type of players when they come in the 2020 season. Guys like Justin Rogers, who's a 5-star who can play either offensive line or defensive line. You look at guys like a 5-star receiver, Rakeem Jarrett. On multiple sides of the ball, B.J. Ujulari, a 4-star pass rusher who plays at Marietta, who's teammates with Harrison Bailey. Eric Gilbert, who I think is kind of a Georgia lean, but Tennessee is definitely not going to stop recruiting him anytime soon. I think he's one of, I think he might be the #1 overall athlete right now, but he projects as a tight end at the next level as a 5-star. Tennessee has got a lot of guys on their board right now, offensive line, defensive line. I haven't mentioned Tate Ratledge, Cooper Mays, and any of those guys either. There's a lot of guys they're targeting right now, and I'll be interested to see how many of these guys are going to commit early in this cycle. They're going to commit May, June, or July, and how many are going to really kind of hold off and wait and see, not just Tennessee, but what other schools do too, but what Tennessee does in this 2019 season. Because if Tennessee goes out and has a good season, goes 7-5, and maybe gets to bowl game and go 8-5 overall, that's going to be showing that they're trending in the right direction. I think a lot of recruits are going to see that and go, hey, that's just with one full recruiting class of his own guys. That's with guys like Monty Morris and Darnell Wright and Quavaris Crouch and Henry Toa and Roman Harrison. He goes, I think you're going to see that. And if Tennessee shows that they can improve on that and get 8 wins this season, whether it's in the regular season or with a bowl game, I think you might see some of these other guys who do hold off on making decisions, waiting and maybe signing on with Tennessee later on, maybe after the earliest signing period. But I do genuinely think that they're moving in that right direction and recruiting, like you said. Pruitt got his head coaching gig for a lot of what he did as a coach, but also what he did as a recruiter. And I think Tennessee is making a lot of solid inroads in recruiting right now.
Well, regardless of the record in the past, it's a name brand and obviously one of the flagship programs in the SEC, one that I need to track and we try to track here at Mark Rogers TV. And so, Nathaniel, I appreciate you stopping by here and setting us straight on Tennessee, keeping us abreast of the personnel as I try to keep up. I'm always a nerd and trying to keep up with the next wave of players that are going to be an impact on the next season. So thanks for stopping by. Would love to have you back very soon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again.